there's an office out of the Vatican who's weighing in on Marian apparitions, seeming to cast doubt on the messages or the miraculous events of Fatima, which is a church-approved apparition. Akita, another church-approved apparition. Benedict XVI actually endorsed that one when he was Ratzinger. And how about La Salette? I'm not talking about like Medjugorje or Garabandal even. I'm talking about the big ones. I put out a video from Xavier on Friday basically saying they're trying to suppress these. They're trying to tell you that they're not legitimate. And everybody got all bent out of shape over that. But Kennedy Hall also addressed this on his YouTube channel. Kennedy, welcome back to the show. What is the story here? Who are these people at the Vatican who are trying to cast doubt on these major apparitions?
As far as I can tell, it's sort of one of these hodgepodge groups that are given a task of interpreting things for us, although not in an infallible or authoritative way, one of these lower level ranking congregations. That seems to be what Pope Francis keeps doing. The office formerly known as Holy, the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. If people understand what that term dicastery means, for example, it's less than a congregation, and the congregation in some senses is less than a holy office, and they just keep sort of breaking them down to a lower level of authority, which in a sense is actually the Holy Ghost protecting the church, because as confusing as it is, when there is a restoration, we can say with confidence that there's no mark of infallibility or bindingness on some of these silly things, although it is confusing now. So what they've done is they essentially looked at these apparitions and said, well, we've sort of got to downplay this aspect or that aspect. And this shouldn't be surprising, because you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, Pope Pius X, whose feast day we just celebrated about a week ago, he talked about modernism, and he suppressed it for a while. And Pope Pius XII talked about it, Humanae Generis, especially paragraph 13 to 15, where he describes Neomodernism, and that's flourished in the church. And one of the marks of what Neomodernism is that you have to play with words and downplay the supernatural. You have to downplay the supernatural in order to take away the character of what these apparitions are supposed to mean. And you do that because modernism requires you to essentially be a naturalist and a relativist. So if Fatima is true, if La Salette is true, for example, we have some pretty dire warnings from heaven about what will happen. And rather than the Vatican officials saying, well, yeah, it's happening now, the various parts of La Salette are actually taking place, and we happen to be employed while it's happening, that's kind of a lot of eating crow on behalf of these individuals. So instead of trying to find a way to pin it on themselves or somebody else, they just have to explain it away. And, I'm not really surprised.
I find it fascinating because I've explored quite a bit lately the conversation of the great apostasy. And I've asked a lot of my guests where they stand on that. And I got a feeling I know what you're going to say here, but I'm going to ask you all the same. Kennedy Hall, do you think we're on the edge or in the great apostasy?
Well, as far as I can understand it, especially reading through the church fathers and things like that about the end times, there are a few things that have to take place before the, capital T great apostasy has to take place. So I'm not going to suggest one way or another that we're there. However, we have had throughout history many prefigurements of what will be the great apostasy, the end times, and so on and so forth. So I would say definitely we are in a great apostasy right now. I mean, there is an apostasy. I mean, if goodness gracious, I did an article or video kind of commenting on the Father Altman situation, and I said, before the council, it was roughly 80% of Catholics went to mass. Now it's roughly 85 don't. We're in a predicament. So just like there have been prefigurements of the Antichrist, Muhammad was a type of Antichrist, Stalin was a type of Antichrist. There's definitely something apocalyptic-ish about what is happening. So whether we're in it or not, I have my doubts about the exactitude of it, but that we're in a type of great apostasy, I think, is obvious.
So what do you argue Catholics ought to do when they're faced with nothing but confusion? I mean, very few Bishop Stricklands around to remind their flock to remain faithful in spite of it all. So what does the average Catholic do?
Well, I'm actually reading through True Devotion to Mary right now, and St. Louis de Montfort talks about the apostles of Mary that will rise in the latter days. Okay, and so we have to cling hard and cling strongly to our rosaries. And the thing about modernism is that it is very serpentine. It's very, very, very slippery. Neomodernism is actually probably more difficult to sniff out than even modernism, because it has an air of conservatism to it and plays with vocabulary. So that being said, cling to the old books. The new catechism, does it have a lot of great things in it? Yeah, but it's got a lot of flowery language, which lends itself to being played with. So, pick up the Catechism of Pope Pius X, pick up the Baltimore Catechism, pick up the old good Irish catechisms, like the Butler Catechism, for example, that was used to evangelize the Irish people or catechize them. Read the old stuff and things that are extremely clear, and they leave no room for ambiguity. And if you do that, and you attend a good liturgy, and you pray the rosary, yes, it's going to be difficult out there and what we're dealing with, but at least you'll be able to spot the modernism when you see it, because it'll be in contrast to what you know to be true. That's really all we can do right now.
What do you anticipate coming out of the Synod of Synodality this session coming up next month? I know there's another session in 2024, but what do you think will be the results? What will we learn from this come November?
Well, I think all these synods have been sort of microcosms of the different difficulties with the Second Vatican Council. So what I think you'll see nothing that changes doctrine, because I do believe the promises of indefectibility of the Church will last in an infallible sense. I think that there'll be nothing that will change it in its actual way. Nonetheless, I do think you'll see these sort of ambiguous documents filled with strange phraseology that will give the impression that if a bishop takes this or that line, he can kind of do something strange or heterodox and use the synod as a justification. I think that's what we'll see. That's what we've seen for a long time, and I don't think it'll be any different.
I feel like we're on the edge of even greater confusion, but to your point, I agree. I don't think they're going to try to change doctrine. I think they're just going to ignore it. What would you say to that?
Well, that's exactly it. That's the greatest confusing part, right? Not doing things in black and white makes it more confusing. So if they come out and say, let's just say, whatever, it's a congregation of whatever has said that, for the needs of the pastoral nature of the human person and the dignity of love, they're going to, begin this process of discernment of the benefits of acknowledging the chaste aspects that are blessing worthy in the relationships, or something like that, of homosexuals. And it means nothing. It's a word salad. It's meaningless. But in there you have words like the goodness, the dignity, blah, 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 blah. And they're going to come out and say, well, because of this, we're following the Holy Father's call to dignity and blah, blah, blah. So in our diocese, we're going to have a year of dignity for homosexual couples, or something like that, Right. And nothing's changed, but the impression in everybody's mind is, oh, the Catholic Church is finally gay. This is good, And I think something like that will take place.
Kennedy Hall, we appreciate your input today on these stories. TheKennedyReport.com is his website, TheKennedyReport.com. We're going to put a link to that and all the stories, the clips, and all the news that we've talked about in this conversation and the whole show over in our show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Kennedy Hall, God bless you. God love you. Thank you again, and have a great day.
See you, Joe.